I'm going to tell the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth. But that gets you banned. They have the ability to pretty much wipe out 4 to 6 billion people. And I think that's their intention. Now, when I first got involved with this, I had no idea that we were looking at that kind of problem and dysfunction. Because really what they want to do, they want to create a global totalitarian superstate where the people are united against some alien threat. And that is the big, super big picture that people need to understand. And a man had come to me every year, if you want the true story of this, from 1991 to 98, and said, do you want executive protection, meaning lethal force? Like Secret Service. And I said, oh no, I'm a doctor, I'm doing this stuff, and I'm a civilian. He says, well, you should have it. I said, I don't want it. So then, when he had 3 bodies fall, he came and I said, do it. And this guy's got major juice inside the system. I won't say who it is. They're very loyal, and basically said, anyone makes a move towards you or anyone on your team, they'll be the last thing they do. So we sort of put in a check and balance. It's sort of the old term Mexican standoff. It's sort of that's where that is, and that's been in place.
Does that still exist for you to this day?
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely.
So you are protected by, let's call it a ghost security team, if you will.
Yeah, I mean and they're very dedicated. They're on the side of wanting this to get resolved, and then there's tactical security that we have periodically. So I don't worry about that. I mean, look, my dad was hand-to-hand combat in the Pacific in World War II on an amphibian, and the amount of carnage and blood shed he saw. I've taken care of patients killed over a 50-cent beer, where people have taken a knife and stuck it into their gut over a beer. I tell people what we're trying to do here, where we're trying to really turn the whole world over on a path away from an extinction level event, not only environmentally, but geopolitically and otherwise, onto a path of sustainable and peaceful existence. That's worth taking a risk for, so I don't worry about it. But in the bad old days of the 90s, 25 years ago, it was bad. And I had a former director of the CIA who was killed, made to look like an accident, Bill Colby.
And that's where I wanted to go, because I wanted to go backwards, because there's so much I want to cover in this interview, so bear with me. You're a medical doctor by trade. Mm-hmm. If they wanted to get you, 9 out of 10, it's not going to come with a bullet. It's not going to come with a knife to the heart. It would probably come with, poison or anthrax or something that you swallow and it's made to look like you have an upset stomach.
Sure.
And the world is finally rid of Dr. Greer, and he can stop educating and enlightening us on all that the government is trying to keep secret.
Yeah, but there's a price if that were to happen. I just told you. And the other price is I have what I call a dead man trigger, which means something happens to me, there's a massive amount of information that's going to get released that we have not released. And there are a lot of people holding it that would be able to reach, a couple billion people. So, you don't play all your cards in the first round. This is a very long strategic procedure. And so, you have to put mechanisms in place. So that's something I put in place in the 90s, and we update it. And then, obviously when I do a big event or something, we have normal tactical security, guards and stuff. Yep. But for otherwise, those folks, they know what's in place. And ironically, a very extremely senior member of the committee, let's call it the majority joint intelligence committee that deals with this issue, magi. I did something before I even knew this existed, in 1989, that saved one of those members' lives. And that's That's all I'll say. But so, they're loyal.
I want to go backwards because you mentioned close encounters of the fifth kind several times in this conversation. Explain to me what close encounters of the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth actually really means.
Okay, that's a good point. A close encounter of the first kind is seeing one of these UFOs within enough range that you see the detail of it. In other words, not a far distant, you actually see the structure. All right. A close encounter of the second kind is when it leaves some sort of physical trace or evidence, meaning a radar trace where it's landed and it leaves physical trace on the ground. I think we have 3,500 of those in our archive. Something like that. A close encounter of the third kind, remember the Steven Spielberg movie from the late 70s, is when you have an encounter actually with a extraterrestrial biological entity, EBEN, an extraterrestrial person. And a close encounter of the fourth kind is when you have an on-board, where you go on board a craft. And a fifth kind, which is the highest category, is when humans initiate contact. In other words, by using a set of protocols and attempt to make contact, and they respond. Now, attempting to is not a CE5 or close encounter of the fifth kind. And by the way, there's an app called CE5 Contact. It's on all the app stores, and you can get it and practice it. It has a whole training process in there. But that's when one responds. And so that was the original project, 1990. So the original project I started was the CE5 Contact project. It led to that contact event in Florida that then led to me getting asked to come up to DC and do all this stuff. So, but that was the initiating program. And basically the idea of it is that since this situation has been so mucked up by covert programs, keeping it out of the main governmental and scientific world and diplomatic world, it's sort of like during the Cold War when there were physicians for social responsibility and doctors from America went over to the Soviet Union and vice versa, trying to create some kind of dialogue and relationship to help with the relationship so we didn't go to mutual assured destruction and a thermonuclear war. But this is humans initiating contact with these civilizations because the U.S. government isn't, the United Nations isn't. The only government I know that's attempted to do it with us was France, where we did a CE5 contact training event during President Sarkozy's term, and the Ministry of Defense and an admiral there were very supportive, and we did that for them, and they were very supportive, and we had some phenomenal events happen. But I think that it's sort of a non-governmental experiment in people making contact, doing it directly, until such time as the government gets its leggings on this and gets control of it, and then begins to do it themselves. Because really, the big mistake here happened in the 40s and 50s when this entire issue became so secret that it then escaped.
That's where I want to go with this. Let's go to what most of us would consider, probably not you because you're an expert, but I want to go to ground zero. July 1947, Roswell.
It happened.
Can you say with 100% certainty it happened?
Oh yeah, it happened. I actually have known before they passed away some of the guys who were there.
Okay, hold on, because I got a series of questions and then I could just go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, I want to establish what you just did. It happened. Mm-hmm. Number two, earlier in our conversation, you spoke about, I believe it was a general that said that there was a shadow government that existed.
Oh, that was Senator Inouye. Yeah.
Okay. Many of the children of the eyewitnesses of Roswell, they spoke about, in layman's term, the men in black. These guys who came and they swore everybody the secret, and they took the alien survivors away, and they took all of the people. If you can go into as much detail about what was found, how real you know that situation to be, because then I want to go into the propulsion and the energy sources you spoke about, but it all starts there.
It actually didn't start there. That was 1947. There were apparently a couple of crash retrieval events in the late 30s and 40s. We know at the Trinity site in 1945, shortly after we detonated the first atomic bomb, there was a craft that was downed or came down in that area that we retrieved. But 1947 is the most celebrated one. That one, there were actually 3 extraterrestrial vehicles involved. We had we have a document, you'll see it in my book, Unacknowledged, which goes with the documentary Unacknowledged. And you can see all these for free on Amazon Prime and whatever. But it describes a new radar system that we had put in. Now, at Roswell. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the sort of military speak here. A radar system, you and I think of it as just something that sends out a beam and it bounces off the skin of an aircraft and you trace it. Those systems can also have an active directional energy warfare system attached to it or associated with it, either within the system or very nearby. So then when something is painted or tracked on radar, it's then hit with an electromagnetic weapon, a directional weapon. Those were actually beginning to be experimented with in the 30s and 40s. By 1947, this FBI document from a field agent to J. Edgar Hoover, which we had published, states that system was switched on, and it obviously had more than just a radar component. It had to have an active electromagnetic weapon part of it. And there were 3 of these ET craft that were over that area, and I'll tell you why in a moment. 2 of them collided. One was in a bazillion pieces, not far from that Roswell Army Air Base. The other one continued westward near Socorro, impacted, and it broke. And there were extraterrestrial bodies and I know of one living ET taken from there. The third one, wasn't found, I believe it's till 1951, up in the mountains going way northwest of Roswell, up in the mountains in New Mexico.
I'm sorry to interject. Are you saying that there was a third ET that got away?
No, there was a third ET craft that crashed. But
there
was one, to my knowledge, there was one survivor that we captured. And I think I have an Army intelligence guy who was the last guy I know to see that being in 1951 at Camp Perry in Virginia. And it was in a crate wearing boxer shorts. And it didn't live much longer. So apparently it lived about 4 years in captivity.
Okay, wow, it's a lot to unpack here. Have you had the opportunity to speak to any of the eyewitnesses of Roswell or the children of the eyewitnesses of Roswell? And what is it that they conclusively told you that you can relate to us?
Yeah, we have. And we have actually one of the children, who's also a medical doctor, is up on our YouTube channel. His father was there and actually had some material. And it was interesting. It had what looked like hieroglyphic type writing on it. It wasn't, but there's some kind of symbols on this very lightweight, unusual metallic part of this craft, ET craft. But in 1995, I had a gathering in California. That was the first gathering of our whistleblowers. And I guess there were about a dozen of them there, and one of them had also been at Roswell. And we have that on a tape. So yeah, I have met with and interviewed both original folks who were there and the children of a couple of the guys who were there. And there's no question about that event. But we have in our archive, we have what we call the Disclosure Intelligence Archive. 122 of these sort of crashes and retrievals.
Okay. I believe I heard you say that you met with someone in the I'm not sure if it was the Army or what branch of service that worked with the retrieval of these ET.
Yes.
What did he or she have to say about it? Did they get a look at the alien itself?
Oh, yeah.
Or if not, did they get a look at the wrecked spaceship? What exactly did they tell you?
Well, if you look at the interview we did with Sergeant Clifford Stone, he was on a retrieval team in the 60s. Now, this was after Roswell, almost 20 years. He was on multiple of these, where he was involved with not only the vehicles, but retrieval of the beings, the extraterrestrial beings, some of whom were living. And so I've interviewed a number of these sort of men. Very few of them have come forward publicly. The most recent one was a man who was on a retrieval team in, I believe it was 2011, out in the north of so-called Area 51. And there was a very large ET craft that was stunned with an electromagnetic weapon that came down, but it did not crash. It was stunned, and this man had a very close encounter with two of the ETs that came out of the craft. But that craft eventually restarted itself and took off. But it's a very long story. We're in the process of trying to bring him into D.C. to go to the Pentagon, where they're debriefing folks right now that we're identifying. You have to understand, I have debriefed over 1,000 men and women like this. And I have in my archive 755 of them. The others are ones who never wanted to give us their contact information. So I'm sort of have debriefed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people like this over the last, now, 30 years. But it's been a long path. But what my job is to take all, because of the what's called top secret special compartmented information, where it's very compartmented, is to get as much of the information from hundreds and hundreds of these sources and put it together in some kind of coherent picture and assessment, like an intelligence assessment. So that's what I started doing in the early 90s, and I still continue to do it. And we provide those to people in Congress and to people in the White House and Pentagon upon request. We're a private organization, so.
Understood. When you spoke to the general or to any of the people who were either eyewitnesses or part of the retrieval team, who actually saw the ET, whether it was the one that passed or the one that they captured alive, are the images that we see of aliens accurate? Are they these short creatures with huge heads, big eyeballs?
Not really. I mean, there are some that resemble that a little bit. There's one species that's about 39 inches tall, but the skin color of, sort of a brownish gray, no hair, very fine lips, no external pinna, ear flaps, the chimpanzee ears we have. They don't have those. They just have an opening. And there are others that are much larger. Remember, there's at least 60 to 70 species that have been cataloged, the people I've worked with. I think Sergeant Stone said there were, at that time, 68 or 69 species, and some they're various sizes and what have you. So a lot of that's sort of a caricature in pop culture. I'll also just say, be careful of what's out there in that kind of public domain. A lot of that is disinformation, false information. Because the ones that are the caricature you're talking about are actually man-made ones that are made to look alien and aren't. Those are the ones that are using all kinds of technologies to quote-unquote abduct people. Those aren't being done by extraterrestrials. Those are being done by the fake aliens. And we have a whole dossier on that, going back to the late 50s, early 60s. The Betty and Barney Hill case everyone's heard about, that was one of our anti-gravs with some good stagecraft, making it look like an aliens abducted that couple. Absolutely. Now, why would that happen? Is because there's a certain rogue element that want to create the specter of a threat from outer space. Because really what they want to do, they want to create a global totalitarian superstate where the people are united against some alien threat. And that is the big, super big picture that people need to understand. It's why I would say 90+% of everything out there on this subject is some type of disinformation that's being curated for its what's called psychological warfare value. It's a complex problem. And actually, that agenda started in 1953 at least. I have a document from a sitting CI director, General Walter Bedell Smith. And CI Director Smith in 53, in a document we acquired, describes to the Psychological Strategy Board of the CIA the psychological warfare value of the UFO subject. And then there's a colleague of mine, Dr. Jacques Vallée, who was sort of like his work became the sort of inspiration for the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind that Steven Spielberg did. And he won't release this because I think he's been threatened, but it's a CIA document from 1985 where it describes the CIA conducting alien abductions in Brazil and Argentina on poor people in remote areas using man-made UFOs that are these anti-grav devices and specialized things that look like an alien, but it's actually a robotic, a very advanced sort of device to advance this agenda of fear. And it actually says in the document the exact words from 1953 for psychological warfare value. Because here's the question. If there's a group of people, and there are, who want to be able to create further global dominion, but not on a path of peace, but of endless war and conflict and control through fear, you've got to have a bigger enemy than the Taliban. You've got to have a bigger enemy than, you see what I'm saying? So they're trying to create this mega enemy. And it's been a 70-year process. Now it's coming to a head because, unfortunately, the corporate media, not you, are sort of lapdogs of this covert group because it's all big money and big corporate integrated systems. And so the narrative that you end up seeing pushed through internet and through big networks and what have you is the threat of the UFOs. Well, there is a threat. The real threat, however, is not from the extraterrestrial ones. It's from the man-made ones, the rogue man-made elements that have studied the ET craft, perfected a lot of their systems, and then have weaponized them and have turned them on into these sort of frightening episodes. Another example are the animal mutilations you hear about. I mean, the top doctor in the world that investigated the first one of those, who was a colleague of mine, he's passed away, concluded that that was being done by a black ops team, a special forces team that had a lot of these advanced technologies, and it was being done for both experimental reasons and getting biological materials to be used in experiments by carving up these animals, but also for their psychological warfare value by leaving them out there, making it look like it was an alien mutilation. So I always tell people, be very careful on this subject. I would say 9 parts in 10 of everything you're going to come across is very well developed disinformation.